Just I should throw that out there, say some of the comments that we might make. You should never chew gum while you are doing a public speech like this. No, sorry. It was happening in the
I'll keep that in mind.
too. No, I don't think put you on the spot. I'm just seeing, as I look around the room and up there, I see a few people chewing gum. Don't get me wrong, I'm all fresh breath. But, all right.
Hello, my name is Ty Soliday, and I'm here to argue that the United Nations intervention in Syria is vital for the resolution of its civil conflict. In March 2011, protests erupted all over the nation of Syria in support of a group of teenagers who'd been arrested and tortured for painting revolutionary slogans on a school wall. Unfortunately, since even before the incident, fighting has been and is continuing in Syria between forces loyal to Syria's president Bashar al-Assad and those opposed to his rule. Speaking of internal actions, the use of chemical weapons from both government and opposition sides is immense, causing even more unnecessary destruction. Syria has one of the largest chemical weapon bases in the world, and they are most definitely, specifically the government, using it recklessly. The United Nations abolishment of these weapons is important in order to uphold international peace with countries who may feel threatened. As William Hogg, Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs of the United Kingdom, said, "Today's groundbreaking text, the first on Syria in 17 months, recognized that any use of chemical weapons poses a threat to international peace and security, thereby establishing an important international norm." Syria's civil conflict has received a lot of international attention, and the support from other countries can greatly affect the state of the war. By the UN intervening, they could help keep peace for Syria on an international level. When focusing on this civil war, we don't recognize the things going on in Syria's bordering countries, like Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, who are struggling to accommodate the flood of new refugees. In order to keep peace with Syria's neighboring countries, the UN should monitor the refugee influx and support their arrival with refugee camps and enough resources. The support and peace between Syria and its neighboring countries is vital for the behavior of the country, along with finding a resolution for this ongoing conflict. As BBC News states, the exodus has accelerated dramatically since the start of 2013, as conditions in Syria have deteriorated drastically. This highlights the link between the number of civilians fleeing and the condition of the war, showing that as conditions worsen, more Syrians are fleeing. Syria's neighbors have borne the brunt of the refugee crisis and have become fed up with the large number of refugee arrivals. The intervention of the United Nations in Syria's bordering countries will help support the peace between Syria and its neighbors. My final claim focuses on the importance of aid directly in Syria. The UN has drafted a resolution that demands all parties, in particular the Syrian authorities, promptly allow rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access for UN humanitarian agencies and their implementing partners. This aid could change the state of the war in ways that Syrians don't recognize yet. All members of the UN Security Council voted to finalize this resolution, including Russian authorities, who had denied the previous three revolutions and hadn't agreed to much of the UN's previous peace efforts. This means that the international community is talking in one voice and saying that the starvation, upheaval, and suffering that the regime is inflicting on many areas in Syria should stop now, and the regime should allow humanitarian access to these areas. This aid will help boost the health and well-being of the Syrian population, creating a stronger society. In addition to the health benefits, there's a lot of talk about the link between the aid and terrorist attacks. The Syrian ambassador to the United Nations, Bashar al-Hafari, said, "Humanitarian aid for Syrians cannot be achieved unless it is accompanied by an end to terrorism. With terrorism a massive problem, the aid will also hopefully help in the decrease of terrorist attacks." In conclusion, the intervention of the United Nations in the Syrian civil war is crucial for the resolution of the conflict. The United Nations has the power, resources, and international involvement to provide Syria with crucial things such as aid inside the country, aid in neighboring countries, and the ability to abolish Syria's chemical weapon base. The country is so damaged as a result of this conflict, and the aid the UN could provide could be life-changing. Any aid brought to Syria will benefit in many ways, like the end to terrorism, getting international authorities to work together and being on good terms and at peace with its neighboring countries in the Middle East. As for the chemical weapons, they hold a massive threat to other countries around the world. International peace for Syria is important for getting the support and help it needs to resolve its current and domestic conflicts. With neither side, the government and oppositions, anywhere close to an agreement, the intervention of the United Nations could be Syria's only hope to restore the country's humanity.
Hello, my name is Daniel Michaels, and I'm here to oppose Ty's proposition that the United Nations intervention in Syria is vital for the resolution of its civil conflict. First off, the proposition team claims that the UN needs to monitor Syria's chemical weapons. Why would the UN need to intervene in such matters if the Obama administration said on August 18, 2014, that US military and civilian personnel had completed the destruction of Syrian government-declared chemical weapons stockpile. Later in your argument, you said that you believe the UN should give financial aid to bordering countries of Syria as well as in Syria. I agree with this statement that some aid should be given to Syria, but I do not think any aid should be given to the bordering countries. It doesn't make sense to give aid to the people in Syria and then to the people fleeing Syria. If any aid is given to Syria, then the people will not flee in the first place, making your second claim that the aid should be given to bordering countries pointless if the first one is successful. We believe the UN should not intervene with Syria for three main reasons. First off, at a certain point, if the UN continues to help give aid to Syria, this will foster Syria as a non-self-sufficient society. An example of this is Ethiopia. Ethiopia has been constantly receiving aid for years because of the famine and hunger in the country. They have received so much aid that they have become dependent on the aid. Always getting help for every problem will teach Syria to rely on others and not help them make advancements. Since the start of the conflict in Syria in 2011, $2.9 billion of US humanitarian assistance has been given to Syria. Receiving roughly $700 million per year for the last 4 years has at least made Syria a little dependent on this funding, making them not prepared when they will no longer receive it. Second of all, why we believe the UN should not intervene with Syria is that this change in regime that people want to occur may not bring democracy or stability. The UN plans on helping the rebels against the dictatorship, but if the rebels get the democracy they want, is the stability certain? If the UN leaves Syria alone and lets the civil war play out, a more stable resolution will occur. Syria may become a democracy, but that doesn't mean all of the problems are going to be solved. Earlier this year in February, it was reported that in Yarmouk, people were eating cats, cactuses, and grass to stay alive. Will the change in government change hunger for certain? There are several other examples that show some problems may not be changed by a new form of government, or if changed for the worst part. A perfect example of what may happen to Syria if the UN intervenes is Iraq. Iraq went from a dictatorship to a democracy, a failed democracy. In 2013, more than 7,000 people were killed with a democratic government in Iraq. Finally, UN intervening could delay the problem, not necessarily fix it. The UN are peacekeepers. What is happening in Syria is a civil war. The intervening of the UN could cause a delay of the actual problem, which is that the citizens want a new form of government. The actual job of the UN consists of maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights. The UN are not soldiers, and what is occurring in Syria is a fighting between two sides. If the UN goes to Syria, they will keep peace, but not actually fix the problem. which will most likely lead to more killing later when the issue needs to be solved. In conclusion, the UN should not intervene in Syria because it will foster Syria as a non-self-sufficient society. The regime that people want to occur may not bring democracy or stability, and the UN will delay the problem, not necessarily fix it.
Hello students, faculty, and administration. I'm here today to explain that we have enough power to destroy ISIS and end the civil war with the United Nations by our sides. As mostly ISIS thinks that all we have to help is the United States, but approximately 40 nations are coming together to try to end the civil war and end ISIS. This can't be only America's war. This is the nation's war. At the moment, Syria has been training people to be able to fight against ISIS, and we know that isn't enough, but that we'll have to do. In Australia, government responded to a request by the United States and said it is preparing to deploy the United Arab Emirates up to 8 Royal Australian Air Forces combat aircraft, Wedgetail airborne early warning and control aircrafts, and a multiple tanker and transport aircraft. Australia will also help to stem the humanitarian crisis. Obama said on September 17th that Australia will send military advisors to Iraq. In Great Britain, Prime Minister David Cameron called ISIS a menace and said the United Kingdom would help arm Kurdish forces, support the Iraq government, keep supplying humanitarian help, and coordinate with the United Nations to battle ISIS. In France has begun reconnaissance fights over Iraq. The French Defense Ministry said 2 Rafale Air Force planes took off from an airbase in the United Arab Emirates. The ministry said France has contributed 18,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition in the fight against ISIS, and senior U.S. State Department official told reporters Sunday during a background briefing in protocol for officials giving their information not to be quoted by name. France Air Force also part of a recent cooperation in Iraq town of Ermoli that punished back ISIS fighters, and along with Australia and Great Britain has performed humanitarian aid drops in Iraq. In Germany, geared toward curbing ISIS propaganda and recruitment. Germany has banned activities that support ISIS, including making it illegal to fly the trademark black flag and Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Germany has also said it was sending military assistance to the Kurdish region to fight ISIS. In Netherlands, a State Department official praised the Netherlands for leading an effort to help curb the flow of foreign fighters coming into the country who may be empathetic to ISIS and assisting it in some way. Dutch leaders have proposed amending nations' laws and would revoke citizenship to those who work with terrorists. Finally, in Canada, a State Department official said that Canada has provided tangible equipment and ammunition to the broader effort to fight ISIS. Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced just days that more than 50 Canadian Special Operations troops are being deployed to Iraq as part of an advisor mission, but that there would be no direct military intervention by the country, according to CTV. Additionally, the abolishment of Syria's chemical weapons was only possible with an agreement from the government and opposition sides. The United Nations worked with Syrian ambassadors to create a resolution that abolished the use of Syrian chemical weapons. Most importantly, this resolution is bringing both sides together to see on a common issue. As stated by the UN Security Council in 2013, the resolution would ensure that the elimination of Syrian chemical weapons programs happened as soon as possible and with the utmost transparency. said, stressing that the cooperation of